Hello, I'm Stephen Matchett from Campus Morning Mail, and this is Expert Opinion, where we ask people who know what's going on in universities, what's going on. Expert Opinion is brought to you by Twig Marketing, Australia's original HE marketing consultancy. Got a brand issue or a message that isn't getting out? Talk to Tim Winkler, tim@twigmarketing.com. And thanks to producer Amanda Johnson from Twig, who makes Expert Opinion happen. Campuses are back in business, with universities announcing that live and in-person classes will be the norm next year. But if you open it, will students come? At least as often as they used to? And will they go where they used to go? Ask a lecturer about attendance for their 9 a.m. Monday class in week 6, or indeed a campus gym manager, where working out is not necessarily always working out. Samantha Hall has ideas on what's coming for the campus. Dr. Hall is Principal Director of Campus Intuition, a consultancy which advises university estate planning by using campus data and asking people on campuses what they actually want. Good morning, Dr. Hall. Thanks for sparing the time.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
First up, what's your take on students returning to campus next year? And given your international client base, is what happens here going to match what happens, say, in the UK?
A loaded question to start with. So it is not one that's easy to answer. And I think if we just take a step back and break this down a little bit, I think that would be helpful. I'll just tell you, what we do is we go in and we look at student experience with campus facilities, and we work in Australia and the UK. So they're the two bases that I'll probably give you the biggest comparison on. Now, it's true, we're seeing photos of dead lecture theatres, students aren't coming to campus, and why is that? And I think what we have to, I look at everything through a lens of user experience. If you think about your phone, it's seamless. A designer has thought about every aspect of you using that device. And I think we have to think about universities in a similar strain. And if I just compare the UK and Australia, I've just been in the UK, the campuses were absolutely packed. They've had an oversubscription due to some changes in the way that their high school assessments were done. They're designed around university towns. The whole area is just vibrant. It's a coming of age experience for students to leave home and go to university. It's different in Australia. We're commuter campuses. And if you think about a student waking up on a Tuesday morning, they've got to try and get to campus for that 9 a.m. class. They've got commute, parking. They didn't charge their laptop and that classroom doesn't have any charging points in it. There's a lot working against them, especially when everything is available to them online. So they can jump on hybrid, they can watch this material later. And I think we have to break that down and understand, what can we do to help students come to campus, but what's working against them as well. We just do campuses quite differently to how the UK do it. And I think that's why they're such a vibrant place at the moment.
Tell me more about the UK experience. Are they on campus and going to lectures, or are they on campus?
So it's a mix. A lot of them, so in the UK, most institutions guarantee accommodation for first-year students. So they're generally living, within 5 to 10 minutes of the campus. They are seeing what we see, even pre-COVID, that lecture halls are attended for the first month, 6 weeks, and then after that it starts to decline. So some of those lectures are going online, and I think that's great. If lecture halls are emptying out by the end of the semester, it means students aren't getting value from actually being there in person. So by all means, take some of that material online. But their classes are packed. So tutorials, labs, they're coming and hanging around the campus using study areas. So we're seeing a big boom in library and informal study spaces. We're seeing a new type of space emerge, if I call it Zoom rooms, but areas where students can participate in online classes without disturbing those around them. They can't really do that in a library. So yeah, they are definitely attending. We are seeing some accommodation being, providing more study spaces so that if they don't go to class, they still have somewhere that they can congregate, so they're not stuck in their rooms, which I think is important. They've got some big mental health issues emerging from COVID lockdowns, and trying to get students, developing those social skills that they've lost during lockdown periods. But yeah, it is definitely just a more vibrant campus than we're seeing in Australia at the moment.
What about internationals in the UK?
They don't have the same level of international participation that we have in Australia. They did see a drop off, but that has come come back online. So they're seeing a higher increase as far as I understand. And they love that accommodation experience and being immersed in the student life, especially for their first year, because really what students want when they come, they want to meet people. So we've got a experience index benchmark where we compare universities, and one of the questions we ask is about sense of belonging, and I find that absolutely fascinating. So students that have a higher sense of belonging prefer face-to-face classes and prefer being on campus. So they have that stronger interaction with friends, classmates, they meet friends, and that's really what students want. They want to be comfortable, they want to make friends, they don't want to be lonely. And that's what I fear with too much online delivery, particularly for undergraduates. Postgraduates, different. You've got work, family, caring duties. But I think we have to make sure that we're not creating another issue by just having online classes that is going to result in a decline to mental well-being for students.
When you talk about undergraduates there, I mean, there's a gap between school leavers. Well, is there a gap between school leavers who it is a rite of passage and what they laughingly call mature age, who may be 23 or 24?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Who do have other things to do.
Yeah. But, one thing I found fascinating with that sense of belonging question that we asked, we had a lot of students that say, I'm a mature age, so I don't really belong on a university campus anyway. I've got kids, I'm a regional student, I'm international. So there still is this perception that the university campus is for young, predominantly white, full-time students. And I think, a lot of that can come down to marketing, to media, to movies, to the perception that students have. So I just think what we have right now is absolutely hyper diverse campuses. We have such a range of different types of students, and we've attracted those in. We've got the student equity exercises to attract those students in. I don't think we've catered for all of those demographics particularly well. So you will find mature age students, or those that don't feel they fit in or belong, will gravitate more towards online classes or not coming to campus because they don't really feel it's made for them. So I think the work now is in making sure that we're catering to all of these students that we've attracted. And we can see in those equity numbers, we've got the students coming in, but we're not retaining them. So those equity numbers drop off once they're going through their degree.
The brideshead syndrome, the whole idea of the dreaming spies, where you turn up for 4 years and you have a great time and you learn how to debate. I mean, friends of mine, children have done that and they've had just a glorious time. But I do wonder whether that's going to be the experience if you are a kid, a low SES kid, who's got to fit study in around a bunch of other stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think this is a real challenge now. I was looking at Andrew Norton's articles on the ABS stats. We've got students working more than ever. They're working more jobs, they're working longer hours. So we have to be careful that we're not shaping the experience to those who are privileged, and that we can make sure that these other students are still able to participate. But, I still am on the fence with offering everything in a hybrid way, because it doesn't really cater to students who are there in the room. I hear a lot of students say that hybrid learning has changed the way that classes are run, the depth of discussion, the way that lecturers or tutors ask questions. And then students struggle with the motivation when they're coming online as well and to participate. So there is no easy answer to this. And I think the next few years is about engaging with these students really closely and understanding their experience and how this can be shaped better. I think the days of coming to campus every day are gone. I think students, they want to fit their learning into 2 or 3 days so they can manage work and engaging with industry and considering their career opportunities.
Are university managements in general, I mean, are they across the sorts of challenges they've got, let alone do they have any solutions? Do they realise what they're up against now?
Oh, I think so. I think there's lots of teams. I mean, a typical problem in universities is lots of silo operations. And I think now we're seeing more of an integration of data coming together to come up with solutions. So from the area that I work in, we're seeing student experience and facilities start to work more closely together, because we're understanding the impacts more of actually, all these places that students use every day. What do they actually want and need when they come to campus? So yeah, I think team integration is coming online more.
Okay. Your surveys, without giving anything away, are there patterns in types of institutions who are responding well or not, or that at least their students are happier?
So interestingly, we probably see smaller campuses are happier, higher sense of belonging, higher satisfaction with teaching spaces, with study spaces. Generally, they are understanding that student base more. Students are able to connect with other students more easily. They've got a really high cohort sense of belonging. You're not using a lot of generalized teaching spaces, so it's really shaped for your degree. And I think that's a challenge because Australia has some really big universities. You know, we've got 40, 50, 60,000 students on some campuses. So we see lower scores as those numbers go up.
But that confirms what you see in the quilt data.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And once again, there, I mean, poor old the University of Melbourne, whose quilt scores on satisfaction have not been terrific the last couple of years.
Yeah. But we've seen some, I mean, you know, not all universities with high student numbers are necessarily at the bottom of quilt. So there are some that manage to go against that trend. And it'd be great to hear what they're doing. I think honestly, sometimes it just all comes down to that sense of belonging. I think primarily it's just making sure people are comfortable being there and fitting in and making friends.
Can that be manufactured? I mean, it's a question for a marketer, but can that be actually manufactured, or is it a lived experience?
I think you can enable it. Like I can definitely see one thing we saw drop off with COVID was activity amongst guilds, student unions, so associations, clubs. Some universities managed to maintain that. We just did some work with a European university, and even though they had lockdowns, they had a really strong online presence for unions and making sure that students were still connecting into those clubs and societies, and their belonging score remained particularly high. Some Australian universities, we've seen that belonging score just bottom out, the lowest scores that we've ever seen, and really low guild union activity. So I think it doesn't necessarily need to be through clubs and societies, but some way of helping students find those with common interests helps them just feel comfortable, and they build a circle of friends. So they find a few friends. It might be through a club, it might be through their degree, but you know, we're seeing courses with really high intakes. It's harder for students to meet and make friends. And then they expand out from that, and they'll want to meet people from other faculties in other areas once they've got that comfortable close circle.
I wonder if it's easier for the Yanks because of collegial sports.
Oh, I think so, definitely. Sports is a huge one. Not just participating, but just the loyalty of attending the games. Yeah, students tell us that all the time. I wish we had more of a culture around sports.
The go Rams or whatever the club
they feel that loyalty and belonging, and they get behind their university, and they're really proud to be a part of that university as well.
Yeah. But I mean, the challenge is going to be because learning is going to fragment. Yeah, I mean, people are going to be doing bits here, bits there, putting it together. The days of 4 years straight on campus, I would suggest, will still be dominant, but there'll be fewer people doing it. It's going to be harder to build that sort of loyalty and identity.
Yeah, I think that universities that can do this will remain really competitive. I think otherwise you're finishing university and you're gone. You don't want to go back. I mean, we're talking about lifelong learning, but if you don't build that identity and belonging, they're not going to come back. They're not going to want to be back. And I've seen that with some regional campuses. They go there, they just put their head down, do the degree, and they get out of there because they don't want to be there. But I think we definitely have to think about that whole lifelong experience. And it's very different in the American context. Even the UK context is very much over there. What university did you go to is one of the first questions that people want to know about. It's, not so much what do you do. So there is just this strong loyalty and pride around the university brand. And we don't really do that in Australia as much.
May not be a bad, in terms of class, it may not actually be a bad.
Yeah. But I still think we could do more to just small things. I see like university students posing in front of signs with the university name. They're so proud of that. They want to share that. There's small things I think we can do to help build that loyalty up.
Don't name anyone unless you want to, but are there universities here with really strong brands for students?
Yes, definitely. I can't name anyone, but yeah, I do see that. But you have to work to maintain that. I think you can't really rest on your laurels and go, okay, we've got a really strong university brand. Obviously, more research intensive universities, Group of 8, tend to emulate more of that some of those UK universities. But I think you definitely have to keep working at that.
Mm. Yeah, so, and is that something, but that surely is something you drive by culture, that in effect it becomes a creation.
Yeah, and it's years, that's years. That's not something you do with one
Yeah,
transformational
no.
exercise. It is something that you have to
Yeah.
continually
Yeah.
work at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I often wonder whether we are that far away from a DVC brand whose job is not necessarily to market it, but to
Maybe.
create it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And that could be, and that's part of that integration, I think, as well, of bringing multiple areas together. I mean, I see little things like you go into a campus and there's different signs, the different brands for the buildings. It's actually hard to understand what the brand is of a campus sometimes when you walk onto it. So there's little tweaks like that to the environment. I mean, that's what our work is. It's understanding people's interaction with their environment. And those are some little things that I noticed that I think we could do more strategically, because a lot of campuses have developed in little pockets. And there's been a building that's been branded, and then another building's been constructed on the other side. And it's not really necessarily a cohesive all-in-one brand and experience when people step onto that campus. And I think for time now, budgets have shrunk somewhat. We have to think, how do we get more from our existing buildings across a campus? How do we make more of a cohesive experience for our students when they step on? And how do we think strategically about the estate to make sure that it is all appearing as one and not separate little buildings and areas?
When Marnie Hughes Warrington was a DVC at ANU, she wrote a long series of blogs as part of it, because she was involved with the redevelopment of that campus. And it was fascinating, talking to the engineers and the town planners and integrating that sort of campus life into the experience.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of that was in CMM. Anyone wants to go back and look it up. Is that what we're talking about? Is that just a whole of where the engineers have got to talk to the marketers, have got to talk to the student welfare people?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, we also, with climate change, we can't just keep finding solutions with new buildings. A faculty will come forward and say that they need a new building. We need more data behind that. We don't have the embodied carbon and the operational energy that goes into running a building. We have to be more sensible now. And I think there is a lot of pressure amongst universities to do more. The UK is, I would say, a decade ahead of us in this. They have a much stronger focus on sustainability, because we end up with these buildings that aren't really meeting our needs necessarily. So that integrated approach is really important, understanding what do we really need? Can we get that from our existing spaces? Can we tweak something that we've already got, or do we have to go and build a new legacy building?
Well, what does that mean for CapEx? I mean, universities have still got the CapEx budget sitting there. Is it a question now of really just slowing down and assuming that everything before 2020 may not necessarily apply?
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, if we're seeing attendance to campus drop, we're seeing less staff coming onto campus as well. I think it is time for shifting from development to, I mean, most universities have got a massive backlog maintenance of, making sure that buildings are working as efficiently as possible, up to standard, safe, high working conditions. So I think that we'll probably see a shift from that CapEx development budget into operational.
I've heard you before talking about libraries, and at the risk of misquoting, I mean, I always had a sense from you that libraries in a lot of ways were winners out of the last couple of years. But if libraries had understood the services, and now you talk about Zoom rooms, is it now a question of now thinking of a campus as not being a utility where people go to consume a service, but in fact a service itself, and that the people coming to are basically clients? Yeah,
space as a service, absolutely. So I think universities and study spaces generally give students everything that they need. They've got a spot to work. They're usually relatively intuitive because you've got books around. So you walk in there and it's just a study environment, as long as everyone doesn't remove all the books from the libraries, which I do fear. It's generally got daylight, good ventilation. You can get a coffee, you can get some food, plug your laptop in. So it's just a really easy environment to work in. And we are seeing students, even if they have all online classes, they're coming to those libraries or study areas just to be present on the university and to help them be motivated and stay motivated instead of staying in their room or at home. So I do think they are becoming, I mean, they're already the heart of the campus for most, but their role is becoming even more important. And I was when we did this work in Europe, I had students, we do a photo diary project, and these students sent me a photo of them in a study room watching a live lecture that was happening down the hallway. But they were all international students, and they wanted to be able to pause the lecture and talk amongst themselves because they couldn't keep up with what the lecturer was saying. So being able to cater to that, I think, is important. Students want to self-pace their learning, and that's what I think we've seen from COVID. Some people don't want to watch lectures, or they fast forward through the lectures. Some people need to slow them down, and I think that's what we're seeing with that recording lecture. It actually helps students line up their level of learning that they need and stay up to speed with what's going on. So I think, yeah, those libraries sort of become almost another classroom.
And a home away from home for kids whose circumstances at home are not great in terms of Wi-Fi, in terms of crowding. And
absolutely, we did a research paper looking at design of PhD spaces, and there was this really interesting study in the US. Just, I think it was about 2021, as COVID was still going. The number one barrier to students completing their thesis and staying up to date was not having an adequate home environment. So we have to be really careful to assume that everyone has a good working environment. And those students wanted to come to campus because it provided them Wi-Fi, a comfortable space, but also motivation, you know, than trying to write a thesis sitting at home. It's quite difficult. It's lonely.
God, I can see a marketing campaign in that.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, it's fascinating. Look, I don't want to hold you up because I know you've got a lot on today. But what would you say to a university executive that came to you and said, our enrolments are dropping, we don't know whether it's just the state of the economy, but we're nervous, and the place is empty at midday on Thursday. Yeah. What do we do?
You have to understand and listen to the student voice. Everyone talks about the student voice, but you have to understand the lived experience of students. So, you know, when we go onto a campus, we might engage with 500 to 1,000 students. We'll analyze 10,000 comments from those students to help us understand what are the barriers, like why are they not coming to campus? Where are they spending their time? And we just did a project on a drop on gym facility attendance, and students sent us photos off the campus where they were spending their time, what's competing for their time and attention. And then you'll be able to understand those hurdles that you have to overcome. So yeah, it is all down to lived experience, and not just having 2 or 3 students representing the views of everyone, but trying to listen to all those cohorts.
Where I walk the dog is next to some basketball courts right in the dead heart of Sydney, and it's full of largely international students at 11 o'clock at night shooting hoops. Because it's where they go.
So we saw this spike in students gravitating after lockdowns towards social sports like that. So we're seeing an increase in demand of those kind of informal social sports, as opposed to working out alone, because nobody wants to be alone anymore. So we're seeing more of a trend towards that, and that comes back down to that your point we were discussing about meeting and connection.
Are universities like here or indeed the UK, do they do enough research of their student body outside their response to lecturers?
That's an interesting point. I think everyone approaches it differently. I think there is a lot of trust put into Quilt, and that leads a lot of discussion. And I think Quilt is really important. NSS is the equivalent in the UK, and it is great. You know, when those results come out, the universities grab them, break them down as much as possible. But what I find within those is it doesn't tell you why. So if there's poor teaching quality, if there's poor satisfaction with libraries or, you know, teaching spaces, it doesn't tell you why. You have to understand the why. And I think that's the next step of actually figuring out what you do with the Quilt results.
But it doesn't, and it doesn't tell you what they think of the coffee, or whether they or whether they want more and different sorts of food.
It's
or
exactly
what times they want to be there. It's outside its ambit.
Yeah. So all those things you're talking about, what pushes them away, that it doesn't tell you. And that's what you have to understand. Like, you know, when they're not coming to campus, what is actually, I talk about this push-pull. You can create wonderful spaces on your campus. They might still not come if you haven't understood all of those little hurdles that they're getting through to actually get onto the campus.
It's the empty lecture thing. I mean, I imagine more often than not, it's not the actual fault of the man or woman up in front of the class. It's not the kids don't like that. It's a whole range of other stuff.
Yeah, a whole range of other stuff. And why would they come if they've got everything that they need online, if they've got the PowerPoint slides, if they've got the recorded lecture? If they don't see the value that they're actually getting out of being on that seat, then that's what we've got to understand. Instead of, I don't like seeing the blame put on students being lazy and, they're not attending and they said they wanted to come back. Again, it comes down to understanding what's pushing them away, talking to them, but also, maybe redesigning the product. If I was a business and I'm trying to sell a product that no one's buying, something's wrong with my product.
But that goes to the heart of it. That goes, I mean, like the famous courses at UNSW in engineering, where you've got vast numbers of kids because the lecturers are interactive and they're live, and you're connected to your tutor as well as the lecturer, and you can learn a bunch of stuff by physically being there. So it raises the question is whether part of this solution is in ed tech and the learning designers.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm not a learning designer, and they'll have much better grasp on this. I do see students saying they miss that interaction though, being there in person, and through the lockdowns we definitely saw that in Victoria in particular. So they miss the motivation of having other humans around them. So again, it comes to that. Do we do purely online? Do we do hybrid, or do we do face-to-face? And I think hybrid is the most difficult one to tackle. Yeah.
We've got an event in the new year, which I hope you'll come and talk at. But for today, thank you. I know today's a tough day for you, and thank you so much for sparing the time. It's Stephen Matchett from Campus Morning Mail, Samantha Hall. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
All right. Bye.